This video is a review for our third quiz on adjectives and adverbs. We reviewed the different types of adjectives and adverbs, and we connected adjectives to nouns and pronouns, as well as connecting adverbs to verbs, adverbs, adjectives, and clauses. So remember that adjectives always modify nouns and pronouns, and in almost every case, they come before nouns. For example, articles such as a dog barked at the storefront. It was an awful sound. In all three of these cases, they modify the noun that comes right after it. Next up, descriptive adjectives. And these are probably the most common words you think of when you think of adjectives. What pretty eyes you have. They go nicely with your big forehead and blue shirt. Indefinite adjectives are words like any that modify friend. Any friend of John's many friends, many is modifying friends, is a winner in my book. Some people would disagree, but those few naysayers are wrong. So the words in bold here are examples of indefinite pronouns. When paired with nouns, they function as adjectives. Now the cautionary tale is that if we don't pair them with a noun, they're just the subject. So for example, if I change this sentence to say few are wrong, few is not functioning as an adjective only when it's paired with a noun. Demonstrative adjectives work in a similar way. These little lights of mine, they are such lights that I will let them shine. Those problems of yours would go away with a little of this positivity. In a sentence like, those are mine, that's a demonstrative pronoun functioning as the subject. But in all of these other examples, when they are paired with nouns, they function as adjectives. Other types, possessive, as in my car is faster than Johnny's car, which is faster than Jill's car. Her car is running on fumes, though. So look for those possessive pronouns or nouns that end with an apostrophe S to show possession. Interrogative adjectives. What luck? I don't know whose idea it was to bet on black or who decided which casino I should visit, but I'm going to be rich. Notice in a sentence like, what is that noise? Here, what is just an interrogative pronoun, not functioning as an adjective. It's only when it's paired with a noun that it becomes an adjective. Some verb forms can function as adjectives. We call that verb form the participle. His torn jacket, describing the jacket, showed his developed muscles. The captivating sight was too much for Jill. Nouns can be adjectives too, two nouns in a row, such as history teacher or coffee machine. And proper noun adjectives, like Canon camera or Shakespearean style, work the same way, and they are capitalized. Adverbs modify verbs most often, and you've probably heard they also modify adverbs and adjectives, but the last one is clauses. So, in a sentence like the baby cried loudly, loudly is modifying cried, the verb. She wrote a very good essay. Very is modifying the adjective good, which is describing the noun essay. In the sentence, he performed rather exceptionally today. Rather is modifying exceptionally, which is modifying the verb performed. In the sentence, surprisingly, the restroom stalls had toilet paper. Surprisingly is modifying the entire clause. Rather than just thinking of adverbs as those ly words, which can be misleading, think about how adverbs clarify things in a sentence. Adverbs answer the question, how? So Lindsay ran around the track. How did she run? Well, she ran quickly. The class started today. When did it start? It started early. They answer where? John ran home for lunch. Where did John run? Home. To what degree? I am finished eating my lunch, or I am almost finished, or completely finished. Adverbs also answer the question of frequency. I always dip my pizza rolls in ranch dressing, while he rarely blows his nose with sandpaper. So we're going to run through a whole bunch of practice questions, and I'm going to identify all of the adjectives in blue and all of the adverbs in red. My friendly neighbor raced quickly to the scene. And quickly is the adverb describing raced. Some people believed Bob's veracity immediately, and immediately describing believed. A disengaged student spends little time on their education. The best movie of the year was showing tonight. Tonight is the adverb that modifies when it was showing. These shoddy pencils barely erase mistakes. A beautiful orange glow can be seen from the top of the mountain. Jill's misleading demeanor confused my naive friend. What trickery is this? Which type of adjective was that? Quickly, modifying the entire clause, she told her favorite science teacher the news. I always buy Apple phones, while others usually prefer Android devices. A torn staff voted stoically for the controversial proposition. An opportunity may become available here, and this is modifying the phrase may become, for you. You have very attractive speech patterns, said the grammar nerd. A few students finished rather quickly, while some students never finished. Bill was sad. Notice this example has an adjective coming after a linking verb, so it's a little different. He has seemed depressed. Seemed is another linking verb. For some time. Now tells us when he has seemed depressed. So that would be linked with the verb has seemed. Hedgehog is described by freds or vicious. Snarled is described by harshly. Bravely modifies this entire clause. And sister is described by her and oldest. Truth is described by the article the. Seldom tells you the frequency of success. And his and best describe friend. Lazily modifies earns. And top modifies marks. Clock is modified with a and broken. Still modifies is. Correct modifies clock, because is a linking verb. Twice also modifies is, and a introduces day. Attitude is described by his, negative, and toxic. Notice is being a linking verb. He is described as lovable, because remains is also a linking verb. Employee is described by the and nervous. Bashfully is how the employee spoke. And customer is introduced with these adjectives the and affluent. Slowly describes how I approached, and counter is described as the, long, and narrow. Patrick was ecstatic. The linking verb was connects ecstatic to Patrick. Same thing with had seemed, connects down to he. And days is introduced with the past few. People is described by a and few. Actually modifies the verb believed. The possessive noun John's modifies version. And the article the introduces story. Streets is described by the and flooded. Memories, happy. Childhood, my. River, the. Winter is preceded by the and harshest, both adjectives. The describes the decade. More describes snow. And tomorrow says when the decade will bring more snow. This, broken, and tape are all describing dispenser, unless of course you consider tape dispenser a compound noun. Still modifies the verb serves. A introduces purpose, and A introduces paperweight. Noise is described by A and soft, and nearby answers the question where something could be heard. John's and swimming describe meet, and yesterday answers the question when the meet was canceled. What describes tomfoolery, and whose describes paper. Your describes name. Brothers is described with the indefinite adjective both. Boldly describes how they were bought. Brown describes the biscuits. The and dilapidated describes building. The introduces city, and a reminder and former prosperity. The and tallest describe girl. The describes class. Aggressively tells you how she spiked the volleyballs. 20 describes volleyballs, and his describes head. Notice this before breakfast, this entire phrase would tell you when the brothers bought the biscuits, but this is the phrase that tells you, rather than just a single adverb. So that won't show up on this quiz. Pieces is described with the demonstrative adjective those. Burnt is modifying the object of this preposition, and because this is a prepositional phrase, the linking verb are connects inedible to pieces, not toast, and quite is modifying the adjective inedible. Flashing describes sirens. The and officers describe the presence, and ahead tells you where these sirens broadcast. Lake views and board describe meeting, though you could make a case that board meeting is a compound noun. And last describes the noun weak, though this whole noun phrase is adverbial. What introduces chutzpah? That describes man. Really modifies the verb needs, and whose describes building. Jill's and fluorescent describe lights. Brightly tell you how the lights flickered, and the, old, and creepy all describe the barn. Dog is described with the and hungry. Eagerly tells you how the dog barked, and the describes factory, and fragrant could be said to describe the sausage factory, or just the factory, and sausage also describes factory. Courageously tells you how he journeyed. The corridor and lit corridor, but dimly tells you how the corridor was lit. His eyes. They is linked to hungry with this linking verb. Desperately describes how they craved a new victim, and a and new describe victim. A and fresh describes source, and though was is a linking verb here, it's connected to a noun. So only thing and the thing are both adjectives, and they're describing mind. Vainly modifies this entire clause. John's describes brother. Longingly tells how the brother stared. And mirror is introduced with these adjectives his and favorite. Usually describes the frequency that Patrick wakes. Notice before dawn is an adverbial phrase that tells you when, but not a single adverb. Today is an adverb that modifies this clause. Lazily describes how he slept. The and torn describe the page, and tragically is in the middle of this predicate was removed, so you could say it modifies the whole predicate. And the and ancient describe the book. Her and positive describe the attitude, and so does infectious because of this linking verb is. Valiantly describes how she leads. John's and jovial describe the jeweler. Jubilantly tells you how he jumped. His describes the surplus. The and disappointed describe dog. His describes tail, and meekly tells you how the dog lowered his tail. The describes creature, ferociously tells you how the creature growled. And a and perceived introduce threat. And its and humble describe abode. Remember, its is a possessive pronoun, just like my, or his, or her. Deeds is described by dads and dastardly. Definitely tells you about the verb demand. His introduces detainment, and the introduces doghouse. The and crumbling describe the muffins. My describes direction. There describes breath, and dense describes deliciousness. The and shortest describe sister. The introduces family. Surprisingly describes the verb achieved. The describes most, and the describes court, as well as basketball describing court. So the NT is not, and it describes the verb do care. This apostrophe S means Monday is blue, so it's a linking verb. Blue describes Monday, gray describes Tuesday. And here the adverb Wednesday says that Wednesday also is gray. So it's modifying that verb is. And the int in don't describes the verb phrase do care. The and loyal introduce the dog. Home tells you where the dog ran. The rain and his school day. My and younger describe the sisters. Yesterday tells you when they watched Frozen. And the and 50th describe time, in the same way that this describes week. And this week, that noun phrase, is adverbial in nature. Patient describes Paul. His and palatial describe pad, and his describes possibilities. Notice atop is a preposition introducing a prepositional phrase here. Unfortunately modifies the entire clause. A and kids describe the show. A and father describe figure. And this linking verb is connects llama llama to the word descriptive. And many and American both describe households. The and purple describe monkeys. Triumphantly describes the verb defeated. And the and blue describe barracudas. Let's go over this first quiz then. Unusual does describe eyes. B was the right answer. Stared was a verb, and so was made. Feel here was a linking verb. Number 2. Multiple describes solution, so D was the right answer. Solve and generates were both verbs, and so was generates here. For number 3, shredded describes lettuce. Number 4, these introduced trophies. So if you look here, looking was not a noun. It could have been any of these bottom 3. But trophies is another noun. It doesn't really describe showcase. In fact, in the showcase is a prepositional phrase. And successful is not describing the pronoun I. Number 5, half-eaten describes the apple. And that was choice letter C, rather. Number 6, some people thought finest was describing French. You could have said probably that finest describes the French decor, but that was not the choice here. So D was the best answer. For number 7, a lot of people thought that of fish was an adjective here, and the whole prepositional phrase modifies school. But fish is actually the object of the preposition. C was the right answer, fish describing the sandwich. Beautifully leapt. Fully aware. And here, aroused was my verb, and fear was the direct object that those teeth aroused. So teeth is my subject, and I have lots of adjectives: the teeth, Rottweiler's teeth, very sharp teeth. In fact, while sharp is modifying teeth, very is modifying sharp, which makes very an adverb. Choice B. To is modifying slowly, and slowly was modifying the verb ran, so that's why to was an adverb. In 12, we had 2 clauses. In the second one, I ride cars, and always described the frequency. For 13, bashfully described how the superfan smiled. And for 14, tomorrow described when, and it modified this verb will make.